As you guys might have heard, the Warriors have narrowed down their top choice this up-and-coming draft to a few picks, with a single prospect being the most likely. This is part 2 of the Warriors' likely 2020 draft pick. If you haven't seen part 1, I would recommend checking it out. It explains some of the context behind why I'm making this video specifically about Deni. So before I dive into why I think he's such an interesting and promising prospect that no one's really talking about, I want to address one thing. In the last video, I did mention how Deni and LaMelo are comparable. Their games certainly have parallels. They both have an up-tempo play style. They're both very creative playmakers. They have very high basketball IQs, and well, the list goes on. However, I think the key difference being Deni makes a lot more sense for the Warriors because he could fit into a system like theirs much better. Essentially, he doesn't need the ball in his hands to be effective, is the key difference between the two. So, without further ado, meet Deni Avdija, the young Israeli prodigy. Deni Avdija, the 6'9", 19-year-old who hit a tournament-clinching and one against Spain, immediately looks to their bench, waves goodbye, says adios, and finally salutes them, only to rationalize it by saying, quote, "I don't want to be boring." Now, I can understand how it would be very easy to hate on this guy if he wasn't such a damn good basketball player. What's up guys, it's your favorite coach's favorite editor, Dre. If you haven't already, go ahead and drop a like, cause those can help. And hit that subscribe button as well for weekly content just like this. Okay, so you know that game we were talking about earlier? Yeah, well that was to secure Israel's second straight under-20 Euro championship. Deni dropped 23 points, 7 assists, 3 blocks, and took down tournament MVP honors. This concluded somewhat of a stellar season for the up-and-comer. So let's brush over some of the numbers Deni's been putting up recently and then discuss what kind of player he is. Deni is 19 years old and also the son to former basketball star Zufer Avdija. His professional basketball career began in November of 2017 after signing a 6-year contract with Maccabi Tel Aviv. That same month, he had his debut and officially became the youngest player ever to play with Maccabi at just 16 years old. A year later, he became a member of Israel's under-20 team. He led them to gold in the 2018 FIBA Europe Under-20 Championship, averaging 12.7 points, 6.4 rebounds, 1.1 assists, and 1.3 steals per game. The following year, a similar story took place, with Deni leading the same team to their second consecutive gold in FIBA Europe Under-20 and was named tournament MVP after a dominating performance and most notably dropping 26 points, 11 rebounds, and 5 steals against France. Avdija makes his living in transitional offense. He's a very fast-paced player that can knock down threes in transition or drop dimes for his teammates for an easy layup. And although shooting is one of his strong points, at the same time, as of right now, he is known to be a little bit spotty, or at least not up to that NBA level as far as consistency goes, as we've seen him knock down field goal after field goal one game and go less than 50% from the free throw the next, which could suggest some volatility taking place in his game. I would guess it's primarily in his head because obviously the mechanics are there, he has a great looking shot, and when he's on, he's on. This idea is actually reinforced by the fact that after he went just 3 for 8 at the free throw line in a game against Serbia, he said, "I'm trying to work on them every day and punish myself when I'm not making them," and proceeds to wait until the clearing of the gym and shot free throws well after midnight. He then went 12 for 14 at the free throw line the next day. Essentially, he's very hard on himself and can get the job done when it needs to be, but it's likely he gets in his own head at times and self-sabotages to a certain degree. But let's get into this very fascinating trait of his in more detail in just a second. I also want to add his defensive skills are something else that you could find mentioned throughout his scouting reports. It's an area he's already polished enough in to play at that next level. He also has an exceptional basketball IQ, and he's perfected the pick and roll play as well as off-ball possessions. To sum it all up, he's very methodical, regimented, and has an extremely clever play style on top of being a well-rounded and very skilled player too. But I want to get back to that point I was making. Deni is insanely competitive. When Deni was asked about a game, he stated, "Our mentality was the same. We came to kill, every night to win." Claiming Deni is extremely competitive almost actually seems like an understatement from what I've been able to find. Of course, this can be a good thing depending on how you look at it. It's also been reported by ESPN he will sulk towards teammates or scold them if they make mistakes, and he's also been known to be very critical of his own mistakes and has been seen many times burying his hands into his face because of something as trivial as a missed layup or a turnover. It's clear he's very judgmental towards himself, which could be one of his downfalls or his biggest strengths. Of course, when you think of the legendary Kobe Bryant, one of the first things that comes to mind is his unmatched and obsessive, you could probably make the case for an unhealthy work ethic. Obviously, this served him very well in his legendary career, so there's no doubt it could be a very beneficial skill to have and can drive an athlete to fine-tuning their game to unseen levels. However, despite Deni's lows, his highs are equally extreme. Previous to the game we talked about earlier against Spain, in a win of the semifinals of that tournament, Deni put an Israeli flag over his head and walked into an ecstatic crowd of hundreds of fans. He was immediately boosted into the air, he led chants, sang songs, and even lifted up a baby into the air quoting the Lion King. Yeah, we're really not kidding about that, it's right there. As you might expect in that faithful game against Spain, the same exact thing took place, the only difference being he was shirtless the second round. But this all brings us to the present. As you guys might be right now, many scouts are also torn not only because of his volatility and his talent, but also his body language and attitude, which historically turns out to be a sort of wild card. A lot of people are comparing him to Luka Doncic, but at this point in Luka's career, once he was eligible to enter the NBA's draft, he had already played over 2,000 EuroLeague and ACB minutes, which is more than 4 times as much as Deni. So clearly an extensive and established track record being another uncertainty of Deni's prospect. If I take my personal bias out of this equation, because as much as I want him to succeed and play well in the NBA, hopefully with the Warriors, I would say the best way to describe him is a wild card, because there's no doubt I could easily see him being the best in this up-and-coming draft, but that goes hand in hand with the reality that he could simply be too polarizing and teams are too timid to pick him up and give him a chance, given the unpredictability in Deni's game and character. But I realize after making 2 videos about Deni and his likelihood of getting picked up by the Warriors, it could be a bit awkward if he goes to a different team, but that's less the point. At the very least, this video is to inform you about a player that has the potential to be a sneaky top first rounder. He's someone we've been watching for over a year now and someone we've consistently thought had a breakout potential. And so if you're a Warriors fan or not, a Deni fan or not, this video is simply a warning, a heads up or reminder that this year's top draft selection might be Deni Avdija, the player you may have never heard of. It's your favorite coach's favorite editor. Thanks for watching and see you on the next one.